My name is Seb Crutch. I'm one of the psychologists at Rare Dementia Support and the Dementia Research Centre at UCL. So I'm very pleased to welcome you today because this is the inaugural, the very first ever later stage support session. And for those of you who haven't heard of this before, who perhaps are new to RDS, or perhaps who've been to one of our joint carer meetings in the past, the idea of these sessions is to provide an opportunity, a safe space for people to hear about issues, to talk about concerns, to receive advice and support, and mostly to get the wise words of others in a similar situation in relation to caring for someone living with one of the rarer dementias that RDS supports. We've run carer sessions for a number of years, but this is the first time we've tried to divide the groups out broadly into the people caring for someone in the earlier stages of a rare dementia, and for this meeting, people caring for someone in the later stages. Now, these are, just to reassure you, these are very broad terms. People are very welcome to come to both our sessions. The reason we separated them was just from some feedback from a number of our members, just saying it's good for people to be able to anticipate, for example, whether there might be quite sensitive issues discussed around later stage support, end of life care, and those sorts of things. So there will be sensitive topics, I'm sure, discussed today, and experiences which are perhaps of others which are perhaps hard to hear. You are not obliged to stay in for the whole session if you don't want to. We're not monitoring you. If you want to step out or just think, I'm not sure this is for me, that's completely fine. We only ever want you to take away what's right for you from these meetings. But that's the broad division. And so if you're here at the later stage meeting today, that doesn't mean you can't come to the earlier stage carer meetings as well. And we just hope that this will be an opportunity for you to know that here we're going to be talking about a variety of issues for people who've been living with a rare dementia for a bit longer. Before we push on too far, I just got a couple of quick housekeeping announcements, if that's okay. One is that at the bottom of your screen, there should be a Q&A box, and that's where we'd love you to put questions for our panelists. You can ask about anything. It doesn't have to just be related to the talks and presentations and stories you're going to hear today. You can ask us about anything, and we will do our very best to answer you. And usually we have too many questions, but don't let that put you off, because we'll any that we don't answer, we will send information around about afterwards. There is also a chat box, and it would be great if you didn't put your questions there, but that's where you can root for the people who are speaking, or show your level of agreement, or perhaps offer a different perspective if you have one on the matters being discussed. Just a quick reminder that, as you may have heard at the beginning, the webinar is being recorded. So that means that you can catch up, particularly if you do need to step away for any reason, you can catch up afterwards. And also just to reassure you that any resources that are mentioned that people say are helpful to them, websites, videos, guidelines, other events, we will send a record round of those afterwards. Alicia's brilliant, super efficient organizer behind all these meetings, and we'll share those details afterwards. So don't worry if you miss a detail or aren't writing notes. One of the other quick things I wanted to mention before we start our videos off with Claire's description of our recently developed later stage support program that she's been running, and we'll tell you more about, is just to mention a little bit of joint working between us. So one example of that is Rare Dementia Support is really pleased to have been invited to join a collaboration of organisations called One Dementia Voice. So that's involving other care organisations like the Alzheimer's Society, Alzheimer's Research UK, Dementia UK, the Admiral Nursing Charity, Tide, and a number of others. And it's really just a collaboration of organisations who have a similar view and want to drive change about how we can improve support for people living with a dementia or caring and loving someone who is. So this is about building links between activities, making sure we don't recreate the wheel, making sure that where one organisation is doing something really well, that the others are pointing to that service. So very much working in partnership and trying to do the very best we can. Also, not just to provide services and support, but to promote the rights of people in your situation and influencing decision makers where we can. So I hope that is reassuring, and I hope that also means that when you, for example, generously contribute a view or a question at these sorts of meetings, that you know there are these platforms where members of us within the team and you yourselves can give voice to those views so that others outside the rare dementia community can hear what it is that you have to say. Another bit of joint working is we're delighted that later on in the panel you'll be hearing from Dr. Liz Sampson, a fantastic friend and psychiatry colleague at UCL. And Liz is the chief investigator of another large research program, particularly looking at how we can improve quality of life, care for people at the end of life. And a couple of recent kind of successes which we wanted to celebrate today is not only have her team won an Alzheimer's Society Hero Award for their research, particularly around supporting people with dementia during COVID times, but also Ali Rose Sisk, who Claire will be mentioning in her later stage support program talk, a nurse doing a PhD, has just finally been given permission to start her research study looking at end-of-life care needs, particularly in people with frontotemporal dementia. So I'm sure that's something that will be of interest to a number of you. You can very welcome to ask Liz about later on. And it's another example of another team that the RDS team are working with very closely. So even if we don't know the answer to one of your problems, or if we will hopefully be able to point you to someone better placed to support you or to investigate and conduct research in these vital areas. Right, so without further ado, I think it would be helpful if we crack on with our first video presentation. So we've got Claire Waddington, who a number of you will know, talking about the recent developments of the later stage care programme. So Alicia, please take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be providing a bit of an overview about the later stage carer program that we ran recently. Before I begin, I just want to say a huge thank you to the Rare Dementia support members who took part in the program. They were absolutely incredible with sharing their strategies and experiences, but also with providing support for each other as well. I would also like to say a huge thank you to the co-facilitators of the program for sharing their knowledge and expertise. So we developed a later stage program as a result of feedback from some of the larger support group sessions and from one-to-one conversations with our members as well. So this feedback was about the need for a space where people could speak openly about symptoms in the later stages, about support needs, and about people's own needs as carers as well, but also the need to be able to access guidance from professionals with expertise in areas relevant to the later stages. So we developed 8 sessions, the first being an introduction to give members a chance to get to know other members of the group, the second on sensory stimulation, the third on nutrition, diet and swallowing, the fourth on legal matters, the fifth on care at home and residential and nursing care, the sixth on palliative care, pain management and end of life. The 7th session was added in based on feedback that we received from the group members about topics that they wanted to discuss within the sessions. And the 8th and final session was where we had really helpful feedback from the members, and we also discussed ongoing and additional support. So I'm going to go into a bit more detail about each of these 8 sessions. I've also included some quotes from our lovely members that took part, just to highlight that although everyone within these groups was caring for someone in the later stages, there is still a huge variation in people's experiences. So just to highlight that before we go into the quotes. So session 1, the members of the group spoke about their need to feel prepared for potential future events, the difficulties in caring during COVID-19, coping strategies and the emotional challenges of caring, symptom progression, and the importance of connecting with others at a similar stage who might have some understanding of their own experiences. So I've got 2 quotes here from this first session. So the first, I know things are coming and I don't want to face it, but at the same time, I know I've got to face it. And the second, it's been really nice to speak to people that are having similar journeys, because we meet people locally, but nobody seems to be in the same position as me. But we've all had the same experiences. It's nice because sometimes you're doing things and you don't know if it's the right thing. So session 2 was focused on sensory stimulation, and this session was co-facilitated by a speech and language therapist. We covered what communication is, the ways to engage different senses, so sound, sight, touch, smell, and taste, and information on general engagement for people in the later stages of dementia. So these 2 quotes here are about some strategies that members of our support group used. So firstly, I always try and get into her line of vision, whether or not she can see me, but she can see a shape and she recognises my voice. I bought her favourite perfume for her birthday and I spray it on her because it's a scent that she recognises. Then another quote on the huge amount of pressure that carers put themselves under. I think we feel guilty that we've got to put 100% effort in 100% of the time. You can't do that. I'd rather come and give 10 minutes quality time. And finally, I know it's really hard work, but it's cherishing the moments you've got with them and the little things, even the tiniest little things, they will be making some kind of difference. So session 3 on nutrition, diet and swallowing was co-facilitated by a speech and language therapist and a dietitian. We spoke about swallowing and the difficulties that can occur with swallowing in dementia, and also the support that's available for these difficulties. We also spoke about how food preferences can change for people living with dementia over time, about ways to support people living with dementia with their eating, and ways to increase nutritional intake if needed, and also the importance of care and nutrition, because obviously this is something that is very often overlooked. So this first quote here referring to the importance of colour contrast with food presentation. What's really interesting about the plate colour, because everywhere you go in the care home, it's all white cutlery on a white tablecloth, and it must look really strange to people. And this quote here about carers' needs often being overlooked. I didn't realise it until after he went into a care home and I actually started tasting my food again. It would take 2 of us to feed the person with dementia. You just don't eat yourself. It wasn't until afterwards that I realised that I hadn't tasted my food for months on end. So session 4 was on legal matters related to the later stage of dementia. And this was co-facilitated by members of the UCL Legal Advice Service. So we discussed continuing healthcare and some of the processes involved, including the checklist and the decision support tool. We also spoke about steps following a bereavement, including registering the death, what to do if someone has made a will and what to do if they haven't, and also the process of probate. So this first quote is referring to the importance of keeping track of things in order to make the application for continuing healthcare. So it's wise to keep diaries of what's going on. And the second quote here, I need to do a will to make sure the person with dementia is okay in case anything happens to me. And that's referring to the fact that a lot of the information that we cover is relevant for dementia, but it's also a reminder of the steps that we should all be taking in order to plan for the future. So session 5 on care in the home and care homes was co-facilitated by the Care Home Selection Service. And we spoke about decisions on at-home, residential or nursing care, and the huge difficulties that people have in making these decisions, and also the very, very real feelings of guilt that carers experience when deciding whether or not someone can be cared for at home, even if the transition to residential or nursing care is absolutely in the person living with dementia's best interests and in the best interests of the family as well. We also spoke about ways to build relationships with care staff at home and in care homes as well, ways to emphasise and to support person-centred care, and ways to maintain connections with the person living with dementia if they have transitioned into residential or nursing care. And we know that this has been a really, really difficult time for people recently due to the COVID-19 restrictions that have been and continue to be in place. So firstly, one of the members is speaking about the ways that they support the carers to understand the person living with dementia. So I've got some video footage of 2 years ago at her birthday. We got a cake and candles and she could blow the candles out. Carers that see her now, I make sure they know how she was. I think you need to feedback what people were like before. And also in terms of person-centred care, in the new care home, they speak very calmly. They've looked at ways of communicating with him that he may understand and respond to. So session 6, palliative care, pain management and end of life. This was co-facilitated by our Admiral nurse alongside a nurse with experience in palliative care research. We covered what palliative care is, who provides palliative care, ways of managing pain in the later stages of dementia, and the impact of caring in the later stages of dementia. What helped me was living for the moment, not worrying about what happened before and what I could have done better. Another member within the session said, we owe it to the person with dementia to have a bit more life. And finally, it's the small things that make a big difference. So session 7 was added based on the feedback from the group members on what they would like to cover within these sessions. And this session was on funeral planning, so the importance of funerals, the process to take when someone dies at home or in a care home, planning the funeral service and the memorial, and also some information about the process of brain donation. So these quotes here are about people's thoughts in regards to planning for the future and particularly funeral arrangements. So I've appointed a funeral director. It's allowed me to think quite clearly and objectively about how best for the funeral to be and how best for the memorial to be. I needed to approach it in a slightly professional way, in a slightly objective way, rather than in an emotional way, and then kick myself later thinking, I wish I'd done that, or why didn't I do that? Planning it, even for your own peace of mind, it just opens your mind to it. People may worry that by arranging the funeral early, that you're somehow writing them off, so writing the person with dementia off. There is a feeling, isn't there? You're not. You're trying to make it what you want and what they want. It's doing a positive thing for them. And the final session, we had some really helpful feedback about the sessions from the members who participated. And also we discussed ongoing and additional support as well. So just some quotes from the final session. I've expressed things here which I haven't expressed to anyone else at all, even to really close friends. I just haven't said those things. We can all share our experiences and know that this is normal. This is our new normal. And finally, when you're together, you're just stronger. So again, huge thank you to the members that took part in the sessions, to the co-facilitators that helped with the sessions as well. If you would like to express your interest in the later stages program, you can email contact@raredementiasupport.org, as we will be arranging some future sessions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire, for not only a great talk, clearly describing the programme, but also for essentially creating it with other members of the team and with members of RDS to address this vital need. I love the fact that there's so much joint working in there between different professionals with different expertise, and the way that Claire has brought in other views to give really detailed answers to people's questions and the scenarios they're facing. And I think it also is a great example of the critical co-working with you as members, where we can only know what how better to improve the support that we and others provide, and when you very generously share the successes, but also the difficult situations that you're in. So huge thank you to Claire for that, and for all the members of that initial group. One of the questions that came in while Claire was talking was, when did this session happen? So this session was piloted as part of our small groups online program mainly during March and April this year. But as Claire mentioned at the end there, this is going to be an ongoing program, where as soon as we have another collection of people, 6 or 8 people who'd like to run through the program, we'll be trying to run a new course. And so please, as Claire said, do express interest if you feel this might be something for you, either now or in the future. I think also that touches on a broader point as well, just a little bit of reassurance that obviously we've been meeting online only during the pandemic. We will gradually try and having the plan to create opportunities for people to meet face-to-face as well. But I just want to reassure people that we will also continue the online meetings, both these big group meetings where you hear from us and I'm sorry we can't see you, but also the smaller, more intimate small group sessions like the ones Claire talked about, where people are chatting face-to-face online, just because we've heard from many people how helpful it's been to be able to join a meeting in amidst your other caring and other commitments, and also for people who live many miles from London and couldn't ever attend in person, to be able to drop in for half an hour or an hour to be with others in a similar situation and get the support they need. So just to reassure you, that will definitely continue. The other just quick thing before I introduce the next video is to mention that in addition to programs like the one Claire's just described and big meetings like these, please do remember you can call the wonderful direct support team with Nikki, Claire, Livy, Hannah, Trish and Karen at any time. They are able to provide and indeed have delivered a lot of the support through that program, and are very happy to talk to you one-to-one at any point about the support needs and the situations that you're in. So please never hesitate to call. And if you've been with us for a while, do know that this is part of a change. We used to be big group meetings only, and particularly for people who've been recently diagnosed, and we're now very much wanting and able, I think, to provide one-to-one support for you, whatever stage you're at in your dementia. Thank you again to Claire. And so without further ado, I'm now going to ask Alicia to open the next video, which is Nikki and one of our members, Maggie, talking about some of Maggie's experiences. And I'll leave it to Nikki to introduce the conversation.
Good morning. Lovely to be here with you again. and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to chat with Maggie today. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning, Nikki, and thank you for inviting me.
Can we start by you giving us a little bit of a background?
Yes, sure. Dave, my husband, was working in a very high-profile job, and he started showing some very strange, odd little things once in a while. This was back in 2014, early 2015, and he would kind of ask the same question over and over again. His mother had dementia, so he was quite worried about her. And then his sister was diagnosed with cancer and was extremely ill with a very rare cancer. So he went through quite a hard time stress-wise. We put it all down to stress. And then when his mother died and then his sister died a year later in 2015, he definitely changed quite significantly. So all the behaviors and everything about him, we all put down to bereavement at that time. But there were these odd little things that made me think he's not behaving in a way that I would expect him to. So I started suggesting that he went to the doctor, and he really said, no, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm fine. The only way I could get him to the doctor was he said, oh, I've got this tinnitus in my ears. It's really not great. So I said, right, let's go to the doctor, speak to the doctor and see what he says. And while we were in there, the doctor said, what's the matter with you? And he couldn't answer him. And I'm in the background going, it's his memory. His memory's gone. It's his memory. No, you need to speak to him about his memory. And the doctor thought it was bereavement. And eventually I took him to our GP, and he'd known us for years. And as soon as I put him in front of our doctor, then he said, neurologist, you need to see a neurologist. He'd had a brain scan, and it was very clear on the brain scan that he had problem. There were gaps in parts of the brain. So when Dr. Perry saw him, he said, no, he then went through all the details about, what's his behavior like. And it was at that time, oh, you're really fat and you've got a big nose. And, all the really inappropriate comments that come along with this disease in the early stages. And then when Dr. Perry said, it's frontotemporal, behavioral variant frontotemporal dementia. And he actually asked Dave to step out of the room, and then he sat me down and explained what would happen. He said, come back in a couple of weeks' time while you've had a chance to go through this. And he sat me down again, and I still didn't know what was actually coming our way. But he said, Dave will have to leave work. There is no question he will have to leave work. He virtually left one day, absolutely top of the job, high, fully involved with it, to suddenly nothing the next day. And I think that really hit him hard. To be really honest, I think that really hit him hard. He really didn't accept there was anything wrong with him. He couldn't see there was anything wrong with him. It was just awful, really terrible for him. Looking back, I don't know how else it could have been done. From a business point of view, he had to leave the company because he was saying things that were sensitive. To go through all the emotional side of what's happening to them disappearing before your eyes over a space of time. Just had no idea what was really coming to us, none whatsoever. I had no idea that it was such a big thing. I was so pleased to be able to come to the meetings at the Welcome Building and meet so many different people. I had tried going to different groups. I'd been to the Alzheimer's group and I'd been to other things, and I just didn't fit in. With this type of dementia, I didn't fit in, and I didn't find it actually was helping. So coming to somewhere like the Rare Dementia Group with people who knew what the situation was, and you could talk to some of the consultants, you could talk to people like yourselves, and just feel like, I've found somewhere that I can talk to people. Because as the years went on with Dave, he actually declined fairly quickly. He was okay at home for a while. I put Hive into the house, so we had cameras, because the big thing with Dave was that he would leave the house and walk and walk and walk and walk. And in the early days, that wasn't too much of an issue, but as time went on, he walked from our house to the station. By this time, he was getting really confused about where he was. Because he'd actually got lost and we couldn't find him, he wasn't in the house, my son had actually called the police. So the police got involved, and then he was put onto their list of possible missing persons. If it happened again, they would know who he was. The Hive cameras came into their own, even though we had been told by social workers and various people, you shouldn't be watching them. It was against their human rights and all this kind of business. And I thought, well, no, he can disappear. And we were taking turns at being at home as well with the kids all working. That wasn't always possible. And we got carers involved. So the carers would come in regularly to see him. And if they were leaving, they would always call me and say, right, Maggie, I'm leaving now. Just keep an eye on the cameras. And then one day, going on about 2 or 3 years now, I'd actually gone away for the weekend with some friends. It was the first time we'd been away for ages. And I got a phone call from my daughter to say, Mum, don't worry, everything's fine, which instantly means something awful has happened. The smoke detectors had gone off. When my daughter and son checked the cameras, the whole house was full of smoke. And the carers had said, yeah, we've left now and just keep an eye on the cameras, which were fine. We could go in and out of them. But what had happened was, since they'd left, he had decided that it would be a really good idea to make some tea. So he'd got all the pans out, and he'd got 12 chicken thighs out, and he'd got a whole bunch of potatoes, and he'd peeled the potatoes and he'd put them in the pan, and he'd put 12 chicken thighs in a pan and totally incinerated them, set them on fire, and hadn't turned the gas off. It was just horrific. All the fire alarm, the 2 fire tenders arrived, and the paramedics, and they were trying to get him to open the door. And he'd gone into the living room and lain on the settee. So he was actually below the level of all the smoke in the house by this time. And they were trying to break the door down to get him out. And Victoria was on the phone saying, Dad, get off the settee, go and answer the door. And she could hear the firemen in the background trying to get him to open the door. And eventually he stood up and opened the door, and they just grabbed him, pulled him out, and went through the whole house and took stuff out of the kitchen. So it was a really, really close call for us. And at that point, that's when the fire brigade shopped us, reported us to social services, and at that point they came and they took in. But all that time up until that point, he was doing very strange things. This disease completely takes you over. We're lucky that we had really good carers, but by that time the social services guys had said your life actually is probably endangered, because you do not know when he may get up and try and do anything during the night, and you're not aware of it. So we did have to look for a care home at that point. As he got worse, the home that he was in couldn't cope with him any longer. We had to look for nursing care. And he's now in a home where he's got nursing care now. He's pretty much bedridden. He is bedridden without any means of communicating. He's completely incontinent. He's on pureed food and thickened drinks, and is really declining now, very much so. But he's with very, very lovely people that look after him so well. But as a journey, it's happened quickly. So from 2015, at the end of 2015, actually having the brain scans where you could see damage in the brain, to now, it's been quite harrowing. It's been very harrowing and very distressing for the 3 children as well.
Thanks, Maggie. I think what everyone will really sort of appreciate, how complex it's been. Very quick for you, but how complex, and lots of situations you've described, which I'm sure lots of carers who are watching today, who are looking after loved ones with FTD, can, really sort of resonate with. It's very sad. And thank you for sharing that. Now, you did you attended and participated in the late stage carers group, which we ran this year, which we were so grateful for you for attending that and participating so well in it. Can you tell us, is there any parts of it that were really relevant for you?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for organising that. I think these individual small groups are fantastic. They're very, very helpful because we're all going through this disease together. And we're all in different stages, and we're not prepared for the later stages. When we can go in and meet people, it's been great. And I know there are people at different stages all the way when everybody's all together. But when it's in such a big group, it's difficult to actually, and I know you used to put people into groups, but it was a very short amount of time. These groups that you've set up now have been fantastic because they've gone week by week for a good couple of hours, and we've been able to sit down and really get into subjects. You know, we've been able to say our own bit within that time frame, and you've hit on various things that are much more relevant to us in these later stages than they are in the earlier stages. For me, the biggest thing for me was actually, because we've already had 2 or 3 scares with Dave almost dying, and we've been asked to prepare for the worst, and he's pulled through from COVID, and he's pulled through from pneumonia, been in hospital, been out of hospital. It's become closer and closer that it's inevitable that he is going to die from this disease. For me, being able to organize the brain donation has been the one thing that's been really, really fantastic. And I would like to say, as an advice to everybody, really think about this hard, because don't leave it until right near the end. Have it all set up in advance so that you don't have to deal with all the emotional side of perhaps them dying on you without having a brain donation set up, if that's what you want to do. In parallel with that, we've had to think about a funeral. You know, 2 or 3 times we've had to think about the funeral, and how we would cope with that when that time comes as well. We've not had to deal with a funeral up until potentially now. So I think having that has been massively helpful. The brain donation thing, there are forms and you've got to apply, and it takes longer than you think it does. So that's been amazing to be able to do that. And the people at Queen Square Brain Bank are lovely, really lovely people to talk to, along with yourselves. You know, you have been able to give the information so empathetically and gently, and with so much help and emotional support behind it. You know, you can get upset about it all, but actually you're there to sort of hold us up and prop us up when we actually need it. That's been just so amazing. I can't tell you how much that's helped, really helped. Without this individual support, if I'd tried to do it at the bigger rare dementia group, I don't think I'd have coped as well with it at all. Having this has been really useful. You know, this is a horrible disease, but actually we are meeting people in the same situation and actually meeting making lovely new friends out of it. You are on a journey. There's no question you're on a journey, and you don't know what's coming, but having people around you that are going through the same thing is emotionally, it's so important. It's really important. And I would say to anybody, if when you first join rare dementia and you think, oh, this isn't for me, I don't need it, don't dismiss it, come back to it. Be aware that it's there for you whenever you need it at any stage. And there are people like yourself, Nikki and Claire, so many of you that will actually help you at different stages, because you know you will see new people come in, you'll see their journey, and you'll see those of us are at the end, near the end. And hopefully once everything passes, that, you know, I know you're still going to be there afterwards as well. So for anybody that comes in and thinks, oh no, this isn't for me, I don't want to do it, don't panic about it, don't worry about it. Just keep coming in and keep joining in. It's hugely helpful.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you. It was so lovely with a small group to see how you bonded so well. You know, there's only 6 of you, but the peer support that you offered each other was absolutely outstanding. You know, it's something that was just so warming to me and Claire, sort of doing the group And it was interesting when we were sorting out the group as well, because we did have the extra session because the group wasn't what we'd completely organised. It was a pilot group, and we really wanted it to be shaped by you, the participants, and you were all amazing at doing that. And thank you so much for allowing us to do the brain donation and funeral planning, because these are really sensitive issues of, you know, we RDS, should we go there, sort of thing. And it was something that, you know, you expressed yourself, you opened with wide arms, and, you know, it really made such a difference for you. So that's brilliant to hear. So just before we finish, have you got any other advice? You've given so much good advice to anybody watching today, but is there anything additional that you'd like to add?
I think it's okay to feel really angry. I think it's okay to cry whenever you need to cry. I think it's okay to feel all the feelings that you're feeling with this disease. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's horrible, but in amongst it, there are some really lovely things that you, at the time, you might not realize they're lovely, but when you look back on them, you think, oh yeah, that was funny, or that was interesting, or he was really good that day, or yep, it was. Sometimes you're going to get a bad day. Don't think that this is the beginning of it just being bad all the time. It goes up and down. So you might have a really bad day. The next day might actually be a little bit better. But they do some really strange, funny things that you just think, where on earth did that come from? There are times that you just have got to find a bit of humor in it, even when it's horrible. And it's dreadful to watch them decline so badly, and they don't deserve it. At the end of the day, they do not deserve this, but it is what we've been dealt, and we do have to just get on and deal as much as we can with it, really.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Thank you for sharing so honestly. Maggie will be on our Q&A panel today as well. So if you've got some questions, please send them in for her now. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you very much.
Well, I'd just like to add my thanks to Nikki's, to Maggie, for those incredibly wise and perceptive words. Really, really moving and very generous of you, Maggie, to describe, be so kind in your description of the value that you found in sharing and in bonding with others through those small groups and through other opportunities. One other thing that Maggie said that really struck me as well, which I'm sure will resonate with a lot of people, is her phrase that this disease, whatever your diagnosis that you're facing, this disease completely takes you over. And I was just thinking, that made me think that quite often support organizations and friendship circles and all the other places we go, we often deal in practicalities. And I think that's particularly the case in the dementia sphere, where a lot of places will just want to tell you things you can do, or deal with everyday, very practical things like dressing and washing and those things. But there's so much else besides, which is reflected in Maggie's comment about this disease completely takes you over. And so I'd just like to encourage any of you who've perhaps not sought help or support before, or have only felt allowed or that it's permissible to seek help for certain things, perhaps very practical things, to also think about whether there's anything else you would like to ask for help for or help with. And that might be more in the sort of emotional sphere and how you are coping and trying to keep going. I'm reminded of a quote from an artist and illustrator called Charlie Mackesy, who wrote a book that a number of you may have heard of called, if I get this right, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. But it's a series of beautiful pictures with very kind of universal truths in them. And one thing he said, I think, is that asking for help is the most courageous thing you can do. And so for anybody who struggles to ask for help, please know that we and others are here to offer you help, whatever help that is. It might be practical, it might be emotional, it might be something else, but please, please, please feel welcome to ask for help. Moving on now, I'm really delighted that Emma Harding, one of the wonderful members of our team, is going to introduce Richard, a member of RDS for a number of years, and I'm delighted that Elise is now going to share their conversation with you.
So hello, Richard, and thank you very much for talking to me today about your experience as a carer for your wife, Lynn. And I wanted to particularly thank you for talking to me today, Richard, and for supporting our efforts to try and make sure we have resources that are helpful for people at different stages, because we know people have really different needs, whether in the early stages or the later stages. And yeah, we really want our resources to match that. So I just thank you in advance for being open to sharing your experience with me today. For everybody watching, could you just tell us in a few words about your situation?
So Lynn and I got the diagnosis in 2017 of PCA. There was obviously some sense of something wrong before, whether it was, dementia or environmental problems, we weren't sure. But we got a dementia diagnosis, and then we got we had to go away and do some things and bits and pieces, follow the instructions, as it were. And when we came back, the next doctor we saw said, he thought it was PCA. He didn't know very much about PCA, but he'd had some information circulated around. That was at the local mental health clinic. And so I looked up PCA on the internet, basically, and found as much as I could. And strangely enough, the next Friday there was a meeting of your good selves, the rare dementia support, and I just turned up uninvited and forced my way to the front and asked lots of questions. I think there's more information out there now, but we've had this sort of 4-year ride now, as we speak, of PCA gradually getting worse in chunks for each stages. You go on a plateau for a while, and then it goes down to a next stage, as it were. At the moment, Lynn's in bed all day, more or less. We try to sit her out for her meals and maybe for an hour or two in the afternoon. She has to be fed, changed, dressed. She can't wash. She can't do anything for herself, really. And that's where we are. She's very little communication now, but we can sometimes have a little chat, and I get a smile but you've got to pick your moments, But yes, that's where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Richard. And so much of what you've just said, I'm sure will resonate with other people, that kind of long wait for a diagnosis. And then even when you're dealing with professionals, they potentially won't have come across PCA before. And a lot of the research and information seeking falls to you. And it sounds like you did a good job of that, turning up to that meeting and pushing your way to the front. I wondered if you could, we've spoken a few times about this sort of thing, this idea of being in Lynn's world, and a couple of examples you've shared before about say if you're taking the dog out, or if Lynn asks after her mum. You've mentioned how you sort of manage those situations, and I wonder if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so sure. Well, it's a case of Lynn knows. I think she still remembers things that I've done in the past, or have done, things that we've done. So like walking the dog, or I used to, still am when I can be, a driving instructor. So I'm, go and do driving lessons. She knows I do those sort of things. And so like, if I'm going to go out, whatever, I just say, I've got to go and give a driving lesson now. That's okay. Will you look after the dog while I go out? And she'll say yes, because it makes sense to it's in her, memory, as it were, and of course, because I do it not regularly, but because it's a regular thing, if you like, she sort of picks up on it and remembers. And even sometimes, I'm going to the shops, or, I'm going to take the dog for a walk. And she might say, oh, I'll come with you, or I'll come with you to the shops, or whatever. Obviously, she can't, but rather than say you can't, I sort of say, well, okay, I'll get the dog's lead and I'm going to get a coat. Do you want a coat? And then I sort of come back and say, right, I'm ready. Do you want to come? It doesn't look too nice out there. And she'll say, oh, no, I think I'll stay at home today because we'll go tomorrow. Or, I say, right, we'll go tomorrow then, or later. And she's happy with that. Rather than saying, no, you can't do that, it's just sort of saying, okay, we'll do that. And then sort of giving it sort of 5 minutes and come back, say, I'm ready. Do you want to go? It looks like it's going to start raining. And she'll say, oh, no, I'll stay here this time. Or, we're same with the shops, I'll get the bags and we'll go. And do you want to come? And she said, oh, no, I don't think I will. Whereas I think if I'd have said, you can't come, it would have been, yes, I will, sort of thing. And the same with the mother, I want to see my mother, or I want to go home with some things. And that can be hurtful if she's at home. I think you can feel all, where you are home. And of course, I think it's just an acknowledgement of them that they want what home represents, a comfy and a motherly love. They need to be loved, or and I think they can't put that into words, but the shorthand is, oh, I want my mother, or I want to be home, and to acknowledge that. And with the mother, when she says, I want to go home to my mum's, I used to say, or still do, well, it's a bit late now, your mother will be in bed, shall we go tomorrow? Or we'll wait for the weather to approve, or we'll have a cup of tea, or any delaying tactic. Not saying we're not going to do it, and not say that your mother died 10 years ago, because if you've forgotten that, that's not very, very welcome news. So just agree with them and live in their world and say, yes, we'll go to your mother. Shall we go tomorrow? Well, let's go at the weekend. We can go and take her some tea or something, take her out to the garden centre. And these are all things that we've done, or and so somewhere lodging in the brain. And she's quite happy with the fact that I've acknowledged what she wants to do, and but then she thinks, well, yeah, we can do. She realises her situation, that she's not really in a position to go, I think, now. But the fact that we can do it tomorrow is just as well. That's what I think. I think there is a tendency to get upset with some of the things people say, because they can be hurtful. If you think of them, people really saying that one thing, well, I want to go home. Well, it's been your home for 40 years, But I think you've got to realise it's sometimes just shorthand for things that they feel, and to acknowledge that and just answer their questions, and cajole them along to say, well, we'll do that tomorrow, shall we? Because it's getting late now, Because I think time is irrelevant to most people once they get to sort of Lynn's stage. Yeah, I could go out for an hour or 4 hours. I don't think she'd know the difference if I said, right, I'm out now, and then, hello, I'm back. I think I get more stressed going out than she does when I go out. Because I worry before I go, it's all going to go wrong while I'm not there. And then I'm all, oh, were you all right? And were you fine? And I get told to go away because what are you fussing around for,
Thank you. Yeah. And I think that will be so helpful for other people navigating that communication and not necessarily sure what's best to do. Do you need to correct someone, or is there a way to de-escalate it and to meet them where they are? And as you say, some of those comments can be really hurtful, but just for people to know that they're not alone in dealing with that kind of situation, I think will be really comforting for people. So thank you for sharing those. So we've obviously spoken a lot over the years, and I know you've also joined several of the small group discussions and the later stages programme as well as part of the RDS service, and shared your experience with other members in that format. And I just wondered if you could say a bit about the value of talking about your experiences and sharing them.
Well, I found these small groups, the later stages small group I was involved with, exceptionally helpful, because you don't know. There's no way of knowing what you're experiencing is the same as, or what you should expect to experience, and is there a better way of, are you doing it right? Is it really what people say it is? I suppose that's the time when you doubt, is it really PCA, because it doesn't seem to follow what you read. But actually talking, there was a group, and we're all different parts of the country and different social economic groups, I imagine, but there was a lot of commonality. Some people's loved ones were in care homes, some people were home, some people were, but there's a lot of commonality. There was people at similar stages, and I think Lynn may have been a bit further than some of the other people there on their journeys, as they say. But it was reassuring for me to know that the things I'd gone through, other people are going through as well. And that is what happened. People had the same experiences. And so that I found was very reassuring, because there's not very much the later stages is very difficult, because it is so isolated to a certain extent. You're not seeing the world, you know. I mean, you don't get to visit, you know, as soon as you get to a point where they can't help you medically anymore, you know, you're off living in your own world. And so there isn't that knowledge base, if you like, I think, of later stages, and obviously that's what I'm trying to help here as well. That small group was really helpful for that, because it did sort of affirm to me that this is what happens, you know. You could see the similarities, and that was really great for that, you know. And you're talking to people, and I think is, you know, it's difficult to talk to people that don't know what you're going through. I mean, some people are really helpful and really, you know, good, but some people are really, some people just don't understand, and I think it's reassuring to speak to someone who does, you know, or when you see a light of recognition when you say something, you know. So they're very helpful. That was a very helpful course, I found, for me, and hopefully for the other people on it as well, because you can't bottle it all up. You know, you need to. I find that the times I've spent talking to people like yourself, you know, have been really helpful, because as I discuss it, I can almost put it into place. As I can't, while you're living it, you're not doing it. But when you sit down and talk about it, I can sort of say, well, yeah, that's that issue, and I come away from the discussion, our talking, with, you know, a conclusion, if you like, that I could never do if I was just living it. I mean, so I've had counselling. You know, I've seen counsellors, and the same thing. You're talking to someone, and it's like you're not living the situation. You're actually talking about it. You've got time to stand back, and people don't really have to say anything, just have to listen, maybe just point you every now and again, give you a little prod, you know. But I've found it's you know, it's talking to people about the situation is just so helpful, because it gives you time to collect your thoughts, I think. So, and don't worry if you're under stress. I mean, I've had bad times, you know. I've had to sort of ask for help, because it is stressful. It's not something we plan for, you know. It's, as I said before. So don't be frightened to say you can't cope. Ask people for help. You know, there's your good selves. There's, you know, your GP. There's lots of people out there. There's carers associations. Harrow Carers, where I live, you know, provided me with some counselling and been more than helpful. You know, so don't be afraid to ask. And I think you need to take that time to talk to people about your situation, so that you can put it into some sort of order for yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's something that we definitely try to facilitate at Rare Dementia Support, I guess, whether that's talking to professionals in the direct support team who can help with signposting and that more one-to-one support, but also putting people in touch with each other, like you've described there, as part of the programme, so that you can actually share with people who do know something about the very rare situations that you're all in together. Is there anything particularly about caring for someone in the later stages with a rarer dementia that you'd like to share or mention to other people? Something that we've spoken about a few times is the kind of sense of responsibility that you have as a carer for someone in the later stages. And I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit.
Well, I think the problem is that, you know, you're making decisions for. I mean, maybe some people find this very easy. I'm not a very good person. I don't find it easy to make a decision without all the facts. If I've got all the facts, it's fine. I can look through it and say, right, this is obviously where to go. But with a rare dementia, the facts aren't really there. There isn't a book of rules and you can look down and this point happens, you know. There isn't a manual on it. So I find then that I'm the person that's got to make the decisions. And I say it's not that I don't mind, I just don't want to make the wrong one, you know. So I find that hard. I find it, and there's things like, you know, if someone's in hospital and they're ill, you get the phone call saying, well, I think you ought to come down. Or maybe in a care home, they say the same. But when someone's at home, there isn't someone coming in and saying, well, I think, you better prepare yourself. And so when Lynn has a funny turn and you're thinking, well, should I be phoning everybody? And that started to build up on me as a responsibility. And the fact that, you wanted to tell everybody, well, this could be it sort of thing. And it took me a while to realise, well, that's not my problem. I made sure that people know how Lynn is and what to expect. And surely it's up to them if they can all make their own decisions. If they don't decide they want to come down or do something or whatever, well, I can't worry about it. I've told them, I told them what to expect, and this, that, and the other. She's had this and something else, and so. But for a while, that was really weighing me down, thinking there wasn't someone to say, well, this could be the last, whatever, last 2 weeks, last 2 months, because you don't know. I've got no idea. I mean, I see her every day, and I can see every day we're getting slightly worse, slightly losing little bits, and then one day it'll all come back. Some days it's, it's like the old days. I think you take too much on. Getting back to the point you were asking about, you tend to take too much on yourself. You're thinking, well, when you say even little things like, say, well, what should we have for tea? Do you think we should buy petunias for the garden? Or, you have to make all those decisions, and it doesn't matter, obviously. But it just seems, well, why do I want petunias for the garden? Yeah, I won't bother with tea, because it's just, I don't know, you just miss that sort of, you're responsible for it, and you just want someone else to come and say, well, let's go and buy some petunias for your garden or whatever. You know what I mean? It's because everything relies on you. If I don't get the food for her lunch, she's not going to have lunch. If I don't prepare it, if I don't clean the floor, if I don't do the washing, if I don't clean the sheets, whatever. And I guess it's what people do, but it's not what I've been used to. I mean, I'm sure there's many a woman out there now saying, well, I've had to do that. And that's probably true. And I don't know how you do it. I'm amazed, and I think you're wonderful. But for me, it's just, I find it a responsibility that weighs down on me sometimes. Is a burden. Just trying to sort of say, well, I'll do what I want. Next week, we were married for 39 years. We were together before that. It's a long time to have someone to sort of make decisions with, that you suddenly have to start making on your own. And there's things that you want to tell her friends and family about her and what's happening. And there's just day-to-day type things. And I did find that was a burden. I'm living with it now, because I've given everybody else the problem, if you like. Well, it's your decision if you come and visit, Lynn. It's not my decision. I've told you. I can decide whether I want petunias or not. But it is just, every decision comes to you. And that's, or to me, to the carer. It's whether it's dealing with carers, dealing with doctors. And a lot of people are sympathetic, but a lot of people are just, well, why do you need that? Which is a bit frustrating. I think don't let it get you. I think that's the secret, but it's very hard, because it builds up, builds up. But I think talking is important.
Yeah, and I can imagine, especially when it is such a shift, like you say, from so many years of how you're used to doing things and sharing that responsibility. Not only have you got a whole new thing to worry about, but you're also making all those everyday unrelated decisions on your own as well, which is a lot to take on. It's interesting and reassuring as well to hear you say that, at one point that was really weighing very heavily on you, and now you're in a slightly different place with it, because I think that's very helpful for other people to know that whatever you're grappling with at a certain time, it doesn't mean that you won't find a way through that, or you won't find a way to sort of come to accept that or to deal with that, which I think will be really helpful for people. And I really would like to just say such a huge thank you to you for sharing your experiences so openly and honestly. with me, but also with all the members of the RDS community who will be able to tune into this and hear your story as well. We know, everyone who's dealing with a rare dementia, they're in a situation that they can't necessarily talk to many people about who will understand. So I think having heard what you've shared today will be really comforting and validating, as well as also being really informative and helpful for them. So I'd like to say thank you on behalf of all of us for sharing.
It's a pleasure. I hope it helps, because it's been a roller coaster of a ride for the last sort of few years, and it's a way of at least fighting back, a small part of fighting back against the terrible disease that it is. Thank you for this chance.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to Richard and Emma for your open and honest discussion and sharing it with us. Just while I invite all the panel members to turn on their cameras and microphones, I've just good to reflect, I guess, that I found it so helpful to hear Richard talking about how perspectives can change over time, and particularly around those bigger, weightier issues and concerns about responsibility for decisions and dealing with the nature of the unknown and adapting and adjusting to different new roles in life. So a huge thanks, Richard and Emma. So I think you'll be able to see that we have a panel of 5 fantastic of our members and team who are going to come and join us. Nikki, I think, is also going to join us in a mo, or maybe it's just the 4 of us. Either way, we are well equipped to deal with some of the great questions that you've sent through, for which many thanks, and please do keep sending them through in the Q&A box at the bottom. Liz, I wondered if we might start, as people may not have met you so often, whether you might briefly introduce yourself, and if you don't mind, I'm going to throw you a question to handle while you're doing it, which is the first question that came through was about, can particular medications such as antipsychotics increase agitation in people living with dementia, especially FTD? And the questioner goes on to ask whether agitation is a common symptom in the later stages of dementia.
Right, thank you. So hi everyone, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for those presentations. They were just they were both interesting and heartfelt, and really illustrated some of the issues with such honesty, and I think that's really important with this. So my name's Liz Sampson, and I'm a professor in the Division of Psychiatry at UCL, but I'm also an old age psychiatrist by clinical background. And I work clinically as a liaison psychiatrist for older people in a very large general hospital in Tottenham in North London. And then I do research with the Marie Curie Palliative Care Research Department. So my interests very much focus around people who are reaching the later stages of dementia, and the symptoms and the problems that they come across. And obviously working in an acute hospital, we see people moving in and out quite frequently. And Marie Curie, which is a national end-of-life care charity, has supported my work for over sort of 15 years now, because they understand how important end-of-life care is for people with dementia. And we've recently been funded by the National Institute of Health Research and Economic and Social Research Council to do a very large programme grant of research on end-of-life care in dementia. And we do have a focus on younger onset and rare dementias within that programme of research. And hopefully you'll get to meet Ali Rosisk, who's our PhD student who's focusing on that area. So just to address the question from Seb, yes, agitation is very common in all forms of dementia at all ages. In the more advanced stages, it tends to peak sort of towards the moderate stages, and then towards the very end of life stages, it often settles down as people become less mobile and more stuck in bed. And in some forms of early onset dementia, agitation can be quite a prominent presenting feature as well. The whole issue of neuroleptic drugs and agitation is very controversial, and actually most of the evidence shows that they're not particularly effective for managing agitation. And there is a lot of evidence, particularly in young onset dementias and Lewy body dementias, that giving some neuroleptic drugs can actually hasten the progress of dementia and make things worse. And they can oversedate people, they can increase the risk of falls, and they can cause problems with swallowing, and are generally not ideal. Now, having said that, if someone is extremely agitated and extremely distressed and is a risk to themselves or someone else, then a trial of very, very tiny doses of some of the newer antipsychotic medications, and those are drugs that you might have heard of called risperidone or quetiapine or olanzapine, a trial of those drugs at low doses very cautiously may be in the person's best interest, and actually in the best interest of the family as well. So the pendulum swung away from these drugs massively, which I think was important, but actually my clinical perspective on this is that if actually giving someone a tiny dose of these drugs at night settles them down, improves their sleep, improves their carer's sleep, means they don't necessarily have to go into a care home, then the risks and benefits mean that it might be worth trying a prescription of these drugs. So I don't have a definitive answer on the drugs. As with all of these things, it's about that balance, and sometimes just trying a tiny dose might be effective.
Thank you, Liz. So helpful to have that nuanced view, because I think there's can be kind of simple narratives that are put out there of drugs are evil,
Yes.
and it's not that simple. And individual support, particularly from a kind of experienced psychiatrist, is so key in many of these situations.
Yes.
So thank you, really great answer. The next question that I might start with, throw to Claire to start with, if that's okay, is from a member who says, my mum's speech has deteriorated and she's taken to screaming, sometimes seemingly in anger. It can start very suddenly and it can last on and off all day and night. Do you have any insights into why this is happening and what we may do to help relieve her distress?
So thanks, Seb, and thanks for the question. I'm really sorry to hear that. It does sound really distressing for you as a carer in that situation. So it's not unheard of that people with dementia will use screaming as a way to communicate something. So it might be an unmet need, as you've already kind of mentioned there, needing to go to the toilet, feeling uncomfortable. So the first thing I would kind of look at is those triggers. So whether somebody might be feeling anxious and might just need some help with relaxing, whether they are hungry, all of those kinds of things first. I would say that if you've tried to meet all of those needs, and it could be very small things. So I know one of the carers of our later stages group mentioned that the person that she's caring for, sometimes if she just has an itchy nose, sometimes she will scream because it's so uncomfortable for her. So trying small things like that as well can help. But I would say if you've tried all of that and the screaming is going on and on night and day, you need additional support. So you shouldn't be coping with that by yourself. So I would raise that with the GP and see if you can get some additional support from the community mental health team. And also please come to us at the direct support team to see if we can talk through other specific strategies for you as well. But just to say again, it's not an easy thing to deal with.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Another question that came in very specifically directed towards Maggie, if that's okay, is one of the people who was listening to your story, Maggie, was asking if it was okay to ask when you moved your lovely husband into his care home, and perhaps a little bit about the decision, how you'd come to that decision.
Yes, we had actually been advised by the consultant, and we had an admiral nurse at the time, and they advised us to start looking for care homes well in advance so that when the time actually came, we'd have an idea of where we'd like to go. And it's a very difficult thing to do, because actually what you're doing is you're being dragged backwards by your heels, looking for something you just don't want to have to face. So, and lots of people had actually said to me, when it becomes unsafe for them and unsafe for you, you need to look for care at that point. And it was actually the decision was made for us as soon as Dave actually virtually burnt the house down. It just wasn't safe for him. It definitely wasn't safe for us. So we had to look for a care home. Now, at that point, he was still able-bodied. He was still walking. He was still up and about, and he was under 65. So, you know, he was 56 at the time, and there are not many care homes that will look at somebody that age. sometimes their insurance doesn't cover them for it, or it's just they're just not appropriate to have in a care home. But we did find somewhere, and it was actually quite good, because he was still part of the younger people with dementia group in Wokingham, so he's still able to go out, and he's still able to join in that group. So we wanted somewhere that he could still have that. So we actually picked a care home that was actually residential. It was a residential care home, and by that time he was having problems swallowing and food cramming, and that was one of the main questions we asked. Could you cope with him? Would you be able to feed him? Would you be able to do that? And they said yes at the time. Beware of care homes, and this is where I'd really strongly advise you to get in touch with Nikki about choosing a care home, and Claire, because choosing a care home that's right and appropriate at the time is very important. We found that it worked up to a point, and then he had to go into hospital with pneumonia. And he'd had these unexplained falls, and they did a brain scan because I wanted to know whether he had any bleeds or anything like that. And at that point, they came back and they said, no, you'll need to look for nursing care. It just so happened, all that happened literally as COVID started. So trying to find a care home where you could actually go in and visit was incredibly difficult. And the only way we picked the one that we are with now is we looked at the CQC reports in care homes around our area. And we found one, and I called them up and I explained the situation, and they said, yes, we'll transfer him. So we moved into that care home. They have nursing care there. So I would advise you to look for a care home that can cope with them when they're still fairly able-bodied, but also the fact that you will definitely need nursing care towards the end, and the fact that nurses can give intravenous drips, and they will call on the rapid response team. They'll come in and do all this. So it's almost like a mobile hospital that will come into the care home and do that. But the decision in our case was kind of taken out of our hands. It was unsafe for him to be at home anymore, and that can happen really suddenly. So and I didn't feel guilty about putting him into a care home. Lots of people think, oh, it's awful, it's terrible. But somebody once explained it to me that if you've got a broken leg or you've got even cancer, you would go into a hospice and you'd be treated as a hospice. When you're going into a care home, you're actually treating the brain. So it's a brain thing that they have, that you need extra support, that we could not do it at home any longer. For us, we just couldn't. We had everything in place with carers and everything, but we just had to go into a care home. And it was actually the best thing, because they're the professionals. They are the professionals that being able to lift them, move them, wash them, dress them, double incontinence at home. For those of you that are going through severe problems with huge amounts of urine that are soaking everything every night, and you're up during the night, those are things you need a break from. And that's where the care home have taken over, and you then feel like you're going to visit them as a partner rather than actually a carer anymore. So I would really advise you to try and look for a care home as soon as you can.
Great, thank you so much, Maggie, for sharing your experiences. Richard, I was going to just ask you to briefly comment, because I think one of the advantages of groups like this, of discussions like this, of large groups, small groups, and one-to-one support, is that as Maggie indicated, it's about finding the right situation for you at the right time. And for some people that will be care at home, for some people that will be one or a series of care homes with the appropriate support. And there's no ideology here or in this group or in this community about one thing being better than the other. I've heard people express guilt about both types of choices. People who've done both and felt guilty about both situations, and so it really is tailored, and the opportunity of groups like this and the kind of support Maggie mentions that Nikki, Claire and others in the direct support team can offer is about helping you think through those decisions and weigh up and on balance the situation you're in, what may be coming down the track, and what's the best type of support. Richard, did you have any brief comments on that topic?
Yeah, well, hopefully brief. I would say that for anybody in the situation of the guilt thing, you can feel just as guilty as at home as you can in a care home. So when I go out, I still feel, as I think I said in the chat, I feel guilty that I'm going out and I'm doing something. So I'm all like a mother hen, and then I come back and I feel guilty, and I'm all like a mother hen, and that annoys her. You know, I've had to sort of bite my lip, as it were. So I think if people talk about guilt, there isn't any escape from it. You know, you have to sort of accept that you've got to live your life. You've got to be a person to be a carer, however you do that. But the thing is, we were thinking about respite care just before COVID came along, and I'm glad we didn't actually get any further down. I was going to go for respite, see how she took it, and then maybe if she seemed better off there than she was at home. But we didn't get a chance to do that, and I'm glad for one point, because we could stay together and she could get people visiting, you know, whereas the care home situation was terrible. But I mean, also, she's not a risk to herself now. She's in bed all day, more or less. Yes, she's got a hoist. She's hoisted to the chair. She's fed in the chair. Yes, the carers, I've got two fabulous carers. They come in, and I would say anybody thinking about caring at home, you've got to treat the carers like human beings. You know, I think a lot of people treat them like servants. But I understand when they're late, and and we sort of, I got Diwali presents, not Diwali presents, but you know, they give me, they say I'm like one of the family, you know, and we get on really well. So they'll put themselves out for me and put themselves out for Lynn. And you know, the thing about, I said again, try to make sure they understand that your loved one is a person, they haven't been like that since the age of 3, you know, because I think carers don't necessarily deal with people with sort of like PCA or other rare dementias that happen quite quickly. They all assume she's been ill for years, not in the last.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Richard. Sorry, I think you slightly frozen on my video. I think that's at your end, not mine. But thank you for that comment. And just to say, Trish, one of the fantastic members of the direct support team, has just flagged what you just said of you have got to be a person to be a carer, and has described it as a sensational quote from Richard, which I would wholeheartedly agree with. Liz, I wondered if I could come back to you next with a couple of questions we've had around the topic of pain. One person was asking, is neuropathic pain something that's common with PPA? And is there any advice on this to make sure that my dad gets the right support? And someone else was asking a slightly broader question about whether we have any advice on how we might establish whether my loved one is in physical pain, or how we get proper medical attention. And this person comments that pain scale charts don't seem to work because it's difficult to get the person to engage with them.
Okay, so they're really, really good questions. So I should firstly say I'm not a neurologist. So neuropathic pain is a very complex issue. I'm not aware of any association between posterior cortical atrophy causing severe or causing neuropathic pain. We do know that the way that the brain processes pain might be different, and we do know that in some forms of frontotemporal dementia, people's pain sensitivity can change.
I'm sorry, I think I misspoke. It was someone, you're absolutely right, it was someone with PPA, so primary progressive.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
okay,
no, so I think
you.
it does fit into what you're saying.
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
no, I misspoke.
So Professor Jason Warren at UCL is a real, that many of you will know, is a real expert in this, and we know that neuropathic pain is caused when the nerves are damaged, so the nerves when the hands and the feet are damaged. So there isn't a clear link between PPA and neuropathic pain, because in neuropathic pain, it's often the nerves in the ends of the fingers and the toes that are damaged. And actually, the commonest cause of that is diabetes and poorly controlled diabetes. Saying that though, people with frontotemporal dementias of various causes can have different pain responses, and their brains can process pains differently. There are specific drugs available for neuropathic pain, and sometimes it can be worth trying those, but you'd need to talk to your GP first to think about that. So that's my thoughts on that.
Great, thank you.
The other question was about detecting pain, wasn't it? I think. Yeah. So this is very challenging in people with all forms of dementia at all ages. And I think that more and more we're realizing that sometimes the best thing to do is just to assume the person is pain. And it's very safe to try paracetamol regularly. And that's the key thing, regular paracetamol, not just when the person seems to be in pain. And again, with the help of a community nurse or your GP or a pharmacist, you can really think quite creatively about how you get that into people. So someone might not want to take tablets, but there are lots of liquid preparations available. And in certain circumstances, under the Mental Capacity Act, we come back to the best interest thing again. It's absolutely fine to put some paracetamol in someone's favourite drink, just to make sure they're getting regular pain medication into them. So sometimes, rather than getting really bogged down, and we do this in the hospital a lot, rather than getting really bogged down in trying to decide whether someone's in pain or not, we will try just some regular liquid paracetamol. And sometimes that's very, very effective at settling things down for the person. But we often think, I suppose the mantra that we have is see change, think pain. So if there's any change in someone, then often it can be caused by pain. And in people with more advanced stages of dementia, it's often very subtle signs like changes in the facial expression or someone's functional level, things like that, because they may not be able to tell you that they're in pain. So I think having a very low index of suspicion is the most important thing there. If you think that your loved one is in pain, then there's really very little to lose from just some simple regular paracetamol, and that can be very effective.
Thank you. That's such.
I'm sorry, someone's just made a really important part that covert medication needs to be agreed by a best interest meeting. Yes. Sometimes you will need to discuss with a GP. It's not as formal as it sounds, but yes, that's been made in the best interest. But again, I think sometimes we're too reluctant about using covert medication, especially for painkillers.
Great, thank you, really helpful. Another question, I'm mindful of time, so with people's permission, there's really only time for one more question, but I'm going to take two and we'll run a couple of minutes over, but please completely understand if you need to leave. One question that came in, Claire, I thought maybe you could pick up on this, was what are the most obvious symptoms in the later stages and how do I prepare for them? Now, of course, that will differ according to the type of dementia that you have, but I was just wondering if you could flag some of the common sort of symptoms and challenges that people were raising in your later stage support group conversations.
Yeah, of course. So exactly as you said, Seb, there'll be variation even within the later stages. But what we do tend to generally see is that symptoms might start to look more similar across the different types of dementia in the later stages of the conditions. And that's because more areas of the brain might start to be affected at that stage. So the types of symptoms we might see in someone in the later stages might include things like limited verbal communication. They might develop incontinence. They might also start to have difficulties with movement. So as Richard has talked about with Lynn, she's not really able to move quite easily at the moment. And they might also start to develop swallowing problems as well. Because of these changes, someone in the later stages will need an increasing amount of support because their needs will be increasing. So this might be support with areas like personal care, with eating and drinking, and support with getting around if their movement is affected as well, because we want to prevent things like bed sores, which can happen if someone stays in the same position for a long time. So in terms of the support that you will need with these symptoms and planning for that, it's really important that you're not looking after them just by yourself. So if they're in a care home and they're moving towards the later stages, they might start to need nursing care at that point. If you are caring for them at home, as Richard has really wonderfully pointed out, it's very much a team effort. So the GP needs to be really involved in their care. There also needs to be involvement from other community teams, so community nurses, the local authority, and the palliative care team as well. So really looking at well-rounded support for those increasing needs that someone might have.
Great, thank you very much, Claire. And now just the final question I wanted to raise, which is in some ways slightly the flip side of that, to Liz, if that's okay, is someone has asked, how do carers persuade medics that the rapid onset of later stage decline might not actually be dementia. So she describes the situation in which my husband is now in recovery from emergency surgery to remove an undiagnosed or misdiagnosed brain hemorrhage. Apparently he was very close to death when he was taken into A&E, and no one had thought that there was much wrong with him because he didn't seem to present with recognizable symptoms. And just, Liz, thinking about your great experience of working with people with dementia in hospital settings where it perhaps is often undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. Be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. I saw that comment when I was looking through early on, and I'm really sorry for the experiences that you had with that. This is a massive problem for people with dementia and mental health problems in general, and we call it diagnostic overshadowing. And it's when someone has a known diagnosis of, say, dementia or even schizophrenia, and all the health professional sees is that diagnosis. You know, this person has dementia, this person has schizophrenia. The fact that they might have chest pain and be having a heart attack can get lost. And that's a really common issue when people go into acute hospital settings. So I think the most important thing to do is to, and I'm sure you did this at the time, is to keep communicating really strongly. This is different. This is a sudden change, because if not, everything gets put down to progression of dementia. And it's very, very, very rare for dementia to progress suddenly. And as a carer, unfortunately, you do often have to really, really fight and say, you know, this is not a progression of the dementia, and really stress this is a sudden change. You know, it's a really sudden change. And even how you communicate to doctors, you know, think about different words to trigger them off. So say this happened overnight. I woke up this morning, he was suddenly different. We spend a huge amount of time as liaison psychiatrists as basically being patient and carer advocates and saying to medical and surgical teams, you know, actually this is a sudden change and we need to take that really seriously. Also, all acute hospitals should have a lead for dementia care, and we'll have a lead dementia nurse, and you can contact them through the patient advice and liaison service, which all hospitals will have. And if you feel that you're not being listened to, then really sooner rather than later go to them. You won't be seen as a problem causer. So it's often called PALS, Patient Advice and Liaison Service. It will be publicly available on the hospital website. Go to them straight away with your concerns, and they will likely get advocates involved for you. And they will probably very much want to hear about this if it's going on there. So I think it's really difficult as a carer because you have so much on your plate and you don't want to be seen as a problem carer, but actually have the confidence to really be a strong advocate and get help involved early if you think that your concerns aren't being taken seriously.
Thank you. What a wonderful answer to wrap up a great Q&A session. Thank you so much to Liz, to Claire, to Maggie and to Richard for all their contributions today, and also to Nikki, Emma and the others who presented for a really wonderful session. I hope this has been of interest, of relevance to you. As we always say, and as I said at the beginning, please, if there have been things that don't feel right for you, then please don't take those with you. Just take the bits that were helpful. And remember that at any time, you don't have to wait for the next meeting. You don't have to wait to be booked onto a program. The direct support team are available to you all the time via contact@raredementiasupport.org, and only too pleased to hear from you. They actively want to help you with whatever scenario you're in, and when you just want to listen and want someone who understands and is sympathetic and empathetic to your situation. So thank you so much for being here. As always, I'm sorry that you can't see each other and now break for coffee and drinks and chats and building friendships and all the rest, but we will hope to be providing opportunities for that sooner rather than later, as well as continuing these online support. Just before I finish, and as Alicia, who's very kindly behind the scenes and organising things with Livy and a couple of other members of the team, it really great that you can be here, but please also to let you know that there's a short video from the National Brain Appeal, our wonderful fundraising partners, just after this meeting, if you'd like to stay on and watch that. In the meantime, thank you ever so much. Oh, sorry, someone has just said, can you please repeat the email address? I can, and gabbling slightly more slowly, it is contact@raredementiasupport.org. No spaces in the Rare Dementia Support, just all one word, contact@raredementiasupport.org, and they're happy to help you anytime. So I wish you all in your different situations and different homes and places wherever you are a very, very warm wishes for the rest of the day, for a good weekend ahead, and we look forward to seeing you again soon and supporting you as best we can.
Hello, my name is Eva Tate and I'm the Major Appeals Manager and Manager of the Rare Dementia Support Fund held by the charity The National Brain Appeal. The National Brain Appeal raises money as the dedicated charity for the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery and UCL Queen's Square Institute of Neurology. The National Brain Appeal raises funds for Rare Dementia Support's 2,000 members to help individuals living with rare and early onset forms of dementia, their families, friends, and healthcare professionals. And we also hold several other funds for FTD and dementia research. The funding helps not only the support group meetings in London, but also the regional support groups, admin and support staff, and all other associated expenses, including the new online support groups. When things return to normal, there are travel and accommodation bursaries available to help members attend the meetings. This year, we've raised our fundraising target to 300,000, and this will rise further to 350,000 by 2022 to develop and extend the service in the areas of education, support, and research, with the ultimate aim that everyone affected by a form of rare dementia will have access to specialist information and support, as well as contact with other people with a similar condition. We apply for grants from grant-making trusts, foundations, and livery companies, and have a wonderful group of supporters, some of whom are here today, who fundraise for us in an amazing variety of ways. We would love it if you would like to sign up to our RDS fundraising newsletter to hear more of these stories and receive news of how we can support this community. We have had people do head shaves for us. We have had a gentleman drive across the Mongolian steppe in a VW Polo, and we have lots of people who take part in runs and virtual runs as well. At the end of February, we held a gala dinner called Mission Possible, where we raised 110,000 for the expansion of rare dementia support. And we are delighted to announce that in line with this expansion, the charity is committed to raise up to 7 million to create the world's first centre of excellence for rare dementias. If anyone would like to discuss any fundraising ideas or the new capital appeal, please do feel free to email me or my colleague Alexis, our Senior Fundraising Manager, who will speak about the innovative new ways you can be involved in fundraising for RDS, even during this challenging time. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Alexis Gebby and I'm the Senior Fundraising Officer at the National Brain Appeal. I just want to start off by saying a huge thank you to all of you who already fundraise for RDS. We really appreciate all of your incredible efforts, especially at this difficult time. My role at the National Brain Appeal is to look after all the amazing people taking on various fundraising activities for us. We have had people challenging themselves to run marathons, cycle long distances, climb mountains, and even take on skydives, all whilst raising money for RDS. We also have wonderful fundraisers out in the community who organise golf days, hold coffee mornings, host choir and carol concerts, and even shave their heads. These people ensure that more people like you can be supported through Rare Dementia Support. If you're interested in becoming one of our fundraising heroes, then please do contact me. I am here to support you with your fundraising, and I'm more than happy to chat about any ideas that you may have. While at the moment it isn't possible to take part in a sporting challenge or hold a big fundraising gathering in your local community, we do have some fundraising ideas, such as taking on a solo virtual run or walk, hosting a quiz for your friends or family online, asking for birthday donations in lieu of going out, or even donating money that you may be saving by not travelling to work or buying your daily coffee. Do get in touch with me if you would like to get involved. In the meantime, take care and we hope to see you soon.